Welcome along, everyone. 5 p.m. Friday. Happy weekend, and back with another video which is helping me go through my furlough. Hopefully you have a drink. I've got my cup of tea and some water, of course. Got to stay hydrated. And we're going to walk you through the last few days of fiddling around with some lipos. It was sort of inspired by a chat by Chris Wilkinson, David Spashett, and which then led me on to speaking with Andy Murray, world champion stock driver, and Alex Hagberg, multiple world champion and multiple European champion, to see what's going on with lipos. I want to add, before we get going, I'm not a sponsored driver. I run whatever car I fancy at the moment. I'm running the X-Ray X12 X21, and I'm running a Schumacher E4 as well when we get going. So that's kind of a little bit about just a bit background of where this came from, and I want you to appreciate that I am in no way biased in any direction of the stuff that I use, but I'll come on to that in a moment. So we're just looking on the chat. We've got Gene Sears. Welcome along, pal. Thanks for being here. Where are you from, Gene? And Stefan, hello from Germany. Brilliant. Bit of European. Lovely stuff. Anyone else that wants to let me know where you are and any questions you have along the way, you dive right in and I will be trying my best to answer them. So the reason being is because obviously we've all had to talk about or we've had to put our lipos in storage. We're all worried about, oh crap, some of us have had possibly 3 months out. Not much going on with the lipos. We've cycled them. Some of them, like me, have just chucked it in the corner. I've periodically checked to see if they are swollen or puffing or anything, and I've not had any of that. Some people have had that, but I haven't. So, Gene, you're from Jersey Shore in USA. Fantastic. Welcome along, Ludus. Good to have you, pal. And Matthew Mead, nice to have you along as well, boys. And so the vibe from various people that I was getting is that lipos are going to be crap. You're going to have to go out and buy new lipos, etc., etc. Which potentially, that might be the case. So I thought, well, before I go and throw some cash at it, I might as well get them out the closet and find out what's going on. So these are Intellect lipos. Thanks very much, Gene. Really appreciate the positive feedback. I will endeavour to keep going with my videos, whether people like them or not. It amuses me, and if I can send some love and share some love around the globe, then brilliant. So I've got some lipos here. I've got 2 old ones. I believe they are these 2. They've got some writing on the other side, which I'll come on to. And I bought myself 2 new ones. Now, these are Intellect lipos. I've run Sunderpower, I've run Centro, I've ran Silverback. This is not really about what afternoon, James. Afternoon. A very knowledgeable man just logged on, which is great. James Stewart, they call him part number. He knows lots about different parts and various things of RC. So really keen to get any thoughts from you as I go along, James. So I've run them all, and I've always used the iCharger Duo. I think it's a charger that many people use. And so ultimately, this is all I have. I have a charger, I have some time, and I've got some lipos. And I've just chosen to use this brand. Now, the reason why I've chosen to use this brand is because out of all of the packs that I've used along the way, I've spent around the £65 mark, and I've never really had an internal resistance that has been that much to scream about. The best ones I've had along the way have been with all of the brands. All of the brands, Centro, Sunderpower, Silverback, and IP, Intellect, have all delivered at some point sub 1 IR. Now, the IR measurement is on the screen here, and I'll come on to maybe the charger in a minute, because I think that's a freaking messes with your mind, the various menus that this thing's got as well. And it is just the worst menu to work through. And there's some features on there that I've now finally figured out how to adjust. But I think this whole topic with lipos is a bit of a hot potato. And I was speaking to a good friend of mine, G, on the telephone the other day, and it's like you want to have a fiddle around with this stuff, but in the back of your mind, you feel like with all of the scaremongery that goes on online of blowing up lipos and charging them, it doesn't really make you want to go too far off piste in the fear of going kaboom. So what I did was I started. So I'm going to set the two new lipos to the side, and I got my 2 old lipos out. Okay, and all I did was I charged them up. Now I've found out, I've had so much great information from all of the chaps that I've spoken to, mostly Alexander Hagberg and Andy Murray. Now I also appreciate the fact that this lipo business, especially in stock racing, not quite so much in mod racing, stock racing, it's a little bit of some secrets that guys have spent the time doing and finding out. So I'm not going to reveal everything that they've told me. So I hope you respect that, because they've told me in confidence, and the last thing they want me to do is go shout it from the rooftops. But what I am going to show you is what's possible, and hopefully that'll make sense. So I'm going to park the charger just to the side in a moment, and I'm just going to have a swig of my tea. Are we all clear so far? So the objective in my eyes was, are these lipos any good? And they're crap. You've got to bear in mind that these lipos that are in front of me are £35 each retail. So they are half the price of a Sunder Pal, half the price of a Centro, and half the price of an LRP. So they should be shite. Because if the rule of thumb goes, and when you speak to anyone, it's only the good stuff gets thrown into the top 5% of the batteries, and all the other stuff gets chucked into microwaves or bloody electric tools and all that kind of stuff. And so for £35, I just took a punt on these. Now I have abused these lipos the last 3 days, and out of the 4 lipos that I've got, none of them have swollen. And I worked on I went online, and God rest his soul, rest in peace, Nick Adams. He's done so many good videos, and one of the things that he talked about is he talks about what temperature a lipo will tend to swell at. And I didn't know that there was a temperature. I just thought it swelled up when it had enough. And his thoughts were, it's actually a temperature about 55 degrees. Matthew, the capacity of these are 8,200 lipos. And again, that's a topic that I've spoken to Max Keening, Robbie Dodge, who are great stock drivers in the US. And the reason why I've spoken to both of those is because I've got, I've built a bit of a relationship with those guys, because I've been to the USA, I've run X-ray cars, and they're just a really friendly community, and they really share what they do. And Robbie uses 8,000 lipos, and Max Keening runs 8,500 lipos, and these are 8,200. So I pulled them straight out of the cupboard and I charged them. And so there's a lot of data on this sheet here on my new whiteboard, which is really exciting. Andy Murray said, "I'll tell you what you need a whiteboard," because when I was building the Schumacher Eclipse the other day, I couldn't bloody make the pieces visible to the camera. So I had to start getting pieces of paper out. It looks very, very amateurish. So he said, get a whiteboard. Obviously, of course, why wouldn't you get a whiteboard? So I bought a whiteboard, which allowed me to also draw on it. So I've got actually two boards here. I've got the whole of this board with info, and I've got another board with info as well. So there's a lot to get through. So my apologies. Make sure you've got yourself a drink. So sequence 1, I charged Lipo 1 and I charged Lipo 2. And the very first charge, I just put it through at 1C. Bearing in mind they've been sitting in the closet, and I discharged them at 1C and charged them at 1C. Now, if you don't know what 1C means, because I didn't know what 1C means, 1C is if your Lipo is 8,000 milliamps, you can charge it at 8 volts, or 8 amps rather, 8 amps. Most Lipos now can charge at 3C. So you can go 3 lots of 8, which is 24 amps. With the 406 Duo charger, when you charge it up and you go above 3C, the Duo starts to scream at you and make funny noises because it doesn't really like it. But of course, you'd never do that anyway. But 3C is really the maximum safe charge rate for these Lipos. I don't believe that is covered in the warranty with the Lipos. As soon as you start going over 1C, I believe it nullifies the warranty. But who bloody cares? You're not going to be claiming the warranty anyway. So I charged Lipo 1, Lipo 2, and both at 1C, and I got an IR internal resistance of 2.1 for the Lipo 1 and 2.3 for Lipo 2, which is not very good. I didn't measure the MAH, the milliamps, which is the capacity. So when you've got capacity on your Lipo, which says 8,200, that's what the MAH means, the milliamps per hour, I think, per hour, if it is per hour. Then what I did, the second cycle, I went down 2C and went up 2C. A lot of people have said that when you buy a brand new battery, you should always do it really slowly. Go down and up at 1C, maybe go up and down a few times, etc., etc. So this is kind of what I applied here. I also then went onto a chat that does a lot of racing with quadcopters and drones. And he's done quite a lot of info on Lipos. And one of the things that he did was he charged 10 I think he had 30 Lipos, in fact. And he charged half of them up and down slowly and half of them up and down aggressively in terms of the cycle and the C rating. And what he actually found was that there is no logical evidence to suggest that if you cycle your Lipos gently to start with, they have any long-lasting effect. The level of performance was so negligible, it would be within the tolerance of the difference in the Lipo performance anyway. So doing it up and down gently is a waste of time. In the same way, if you're truing tyres, and this is coming from Alex Hagbag, and I trust him implicitly, don't true your tyres really slowly. Get in there, turn up your Huddy true or your Centro true or whatever true, and get yourself whipping across there as quickly as possible and get out of that carcinogenic room, because doing it slowly is a waste of time. So he did a really good study on the level of performance on those Lipos going up and down. So what voltage do you discharge to? That was a question that I knew was going to be coming. That is a question that I'm not going to answer. But what I am going to say is that is the window, should I say, that guys are discharging to. When we go later on, I do talk about, I actually discharge one down to 3 amps, which isn't advisable, or everyone has said it's not advisable, but I'll show you the results on that as well. So on 2C, Lipo 1 has now jumped from 2.1 down to 1.5 IR, and ultimately what we're looking for with just an iCharger, and again I've had people say to me, I'm not going to name who it was, that the IR rating on the Duo is a waste of time. It's not really giving you full insight into the battery. You need another meter reader, which I will talk about later on, which is just basically a capacity, a resistance meter that you need to use in conjunction with your Duo. Now, my thoughts on that is that this Duo charger is a constant. Now, whether the number is good or bad, it's a constant. And if the Duo charger is always giving you the same number, then you can just use that as reference anyway. The variables of what the charger can and can't do is the connectors. You're going to have length of lead. You're going to have the connector type. There's going to be some variables in there that are going to affect how good or bad your IR rating is. So it's important that you understand that I've done all of these testings on one cable alone, so I made sure that the analysis could be as linear as possible. The IR is the equivalent to us getting a bottle of Coke, shaking it up. The shaking it up is the battery, and then undoing the top and the Coke firing out the top. The IR rating, the lower the IR rating, the quicker the energy is going to come out of the LiPo in effect, and that's how I understand it. I'm sure it's way more technical than that, but that's in effect how the IR rating makes an impact and has an impact. James Stewart's just gone, it's not a waste of time, but it's important to use as a relative term, but not an absolute number. Don't try to compare numbers between two chargers. Yeah, absolutely. So James just agreeing with what I said there, that it's just a constant. And if you have something that's a constant, it's something that you can measure all of your LiPos against. So I then went down to 3C. And what was quite concerning is the milliampage. So the capacity of the LiPo. Now, at this point in time, I forgot that I had just recently purchased a new iCharger and hadn't changed the discharge number. And that's why you're seeing these milliamps quite low, not very high. But having said that, it's a constant and it's moving in the right direction. What's interesting is one LiPo has responded much better than the other LiPo, and I think that was quite important to me to see that actually with two LiPos, one is responding better than the other. And I think at that point I then decided that I need to start maybe moving aside and forgetting LiPo number 2, but I didn't. I then took my discharge rate down a step further, and now all of a sudden we've lost a little bit more in the IR. I've got an IR of 2.0 from 2.3, and obviously now all of a sudden the milliamp, because I've discharged at a much lower voltage, when I've charged it back up, it's now going to fill it up and give me a different number. So I've got 7,086 milliamps in this LiPo, when originally when it came out of the factory it was supposed to have 8,200. So we're 1,000 milliamps down, which is a lot when you come to running for 8 minutes. Now, I don't think it's as big an issue when it comes to stock racing and running 13.5. But if you're running a 6.5 turn motor or a 3.5 turn motor in modified, it's going to be a big issue. You're going to dump, with a minute to go if you're lucky. LiPo 2 improved and got down to 1.5 IR. Sorry if you can't quite see that, but 1.5. Let me fill that in for us. So this was 1.5, and that was 7,181, and that's 7,086. So just move that up slightly there so you can see it. So after 1, 2, 3, 4 cycles, I have improved LiPo number 1 from 2.1 down to 1.5. I think that's an important point, that even if you were to cycle it once or twice, you might go, oh, this is not really improving that much. Keep going. Keep going. You never know what suddenly might start to change with your LiPo. Now, This then got me on to day 2, and moving on to more charging and discharging. The reason why I'm covering them up is because I don't need to jump ahead and miss the point that I want to kind of make here. So now I discharged. I now stuck with lipo number 1 because really lipo number 1 wasn't really giving me much in the way of excitement. Sorry, lipo number 2 is not giving me much in the way of excitement. So I cast that lipo aside, and I started to concentrate on lipo number 1. And what I did was I discharged it at 25 amps and went down to 3 volts. And of course, again, lipos are not a massive fan of going below 3.2. They start to swell, etc. This Intellect lipo didn't have that at all. No swelling, didn't get over hot either. It just discharged to it. I then charged it though at 4 amps. So it was a long charge, real slow charge. So I wanted to try and get as much out of the lipo as safe as possible, and then charge for as long as possible at a low ampage and see what that does. So I then charged it at 4 amps, and I did get a little bit more milliampage out of it. I got another 30. So it went from 7181 up to 7209. Not great, but obviously I've lost my IR. But that IR is still better than the very first one at 1C. So there could be something in that as well, you know, a long, slow 4 amp charge. So that's something to consider. There are so many connotations that you can go through, and I don't believe anybody really knows what they're doing. I just think that the majority will get a lipo, cycle it a couple of times and debate whether it's good or bad, and then move on. So then what I did after that cycle, I discharged it again 25 amps to 3.2 volts this time, and then charged it up at 3C. The milliamps dropped down, but then the IR improved, and I got down to 1.5 IR with this lipo. Again, speaking from a few of the fellas, an IR value of between 1 and 1.5 is something that they would run and use. So it was something that it's just on the outskirts of being usable. Then I went down and discharged again at 25 amps and went down to 3.4 this time, and then charged up again at 3C, again just cycling it again. This time I've now got down to an IR of 1.4. When you think about going down from a 2.1 to 1.4, that's quite a decent jump. The MAH is still not that great, still haven't got that much capacity, so it's not ideal from that perspective, but the 1.4 is a definite improvement. Now, these are HV lipos. Now, I don't know how many of you know about HV lipos. They're each cell is 3.8 instead of 3.7. So at the normally a regular 1S lipo or a regular cell is 3.7 volts, and a 3.8 volt lipo allows you to charge it up to 4.35 4.35 volts, and so at the moment when you've got a 3.7 cell, you're supposed to charge it up to 4.2 volts. A 3.8 cell you can charge up to 4.35. Now under the BRCA you aren't allowed to charge above 4.20. So therefore, if you think about our lipo as a fuel tank, the fuel tank of the lipo, when you're charging a HV lipo, which is 3.8 volts and can be charged to 4.35, what you're doing when you go to the track and you race and you charge up to 4.2, what you're actually doing is leaving this part here empty. It's a bit simplistic, but effectively you're not using that part of the battery. So therefore you're only cycling within this parameter here of the Lipo. When we just had the other Lipos that weren't HV, they were 3.7 and you charged to 3.7. Now my IRs have definitely got worse since going to HV Lipos. So with that in mind, and I maybe jumped ahead slightly, the next day, so all of this took place, the red figures took place on day 1. Day 2, I then went through the same process, discharged down to 3 point something, and then charged back up. You can see that even when I charged down to 3.2 or 3.4, the MAH actually didn't change too much. And actually I got a slightly better IR at 3.4 volts than I did at 3.2, but I went back and did 3.4 the very next day because I wanted to see if I could get the same figures, and I actually got a 1.7 IR and a 7134, so I actually got quite a decent chunk worse than what I'd got at the end of the day before, which was disappointing because you think, oh crikey, I've made a bit of headway here. And I thought, again, it might be a nice fact that I've now got an improved Lipo. So I then continued back to storage, discharged back to storage, and then just charged up. So after I've done this cycle here of down to 3.4 and then charged it back up, I then took it back to storage and I just charged it up from storage. And now all of a sudden the IR jumped from 1.7 down to 1.4. Obviously the milliamps were down because of charging from storage, but that wasn't really concerning me. It was concerning me that the IR had dropped down. And so I thought I'd just have a little play around with it. I then discharged from storage, took it all the way back down to storage again, charged it at 3C, and now all of a sudden, from charging it from storage up, back to storage and down to discharge and then charging it back up again, I got a jump from 1.7 down here to 1.3 here within 3 charges. Well, 3 charges, well, let's not count those first 2, but 3 charges didn't give me the same result. Therefore, day 1, when you go into the closet and you get your Lipos and you go, oh, bugger, they're shite, add to cart, maybe give it another day. Maybe come back and see what the next day offers up. So that was, I thought that was a really, again, we're all eager, aren't we? We're all eager. I know I am eager to buy something new. But equally, I still want value out of my product. But I think we're very easy. You get enough people out there saying, oh, it's no good, it's no good. And then all of a sudden you go through about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cycles. 7 cycles, but this is day 1 here. The red is day 1 here. You go through 7 cycles and you've really still only got 1.4, which is an improvement. You might go, ditch that, no good. But come back the next day and actually see that now that the HV, the capacity's gone up to 7.2, which we only got at a 4 amp charge, which that took like 2 hours, man. That was eternity. But now all of a sudden, 5 charges later, I'm down to a bigger capacity at a normal charge cycle with a 1.3 IR. I thought that was really quite fascinating. So then, and nobody spoke about this. I all of a sudden thought, hang on a minute, I've got HV batteries here, and I'm charging them as though they're not. And so I then decided, right, I'm gonna now cycle these batteries cycle these batteries on HV. So I then set my charger to charge up to 4.35. So I discharged at 3C. Let me bring that into the screen. So up into the top left-hand corner here, I discharged at 3C to storage from this charge here where I got the 1.3. I discharged and then I charged them all the way up to 4.35, and I now got a so there's the 4.35 at 3.26. The IR went up a little bit at 1.6, and then obviously the milliamps now has really jumped up. It's now jumped up to 7,926. Now, when you think about it, what they're claiming on the side of the Lipo is effectively what they're probably claiming as if you were charging it at an HV rate. They're not going to give you a capacity of something where you can charge at one rate or fill it up at one level and then claim another level. So when you've got an HV Lipo at 8, and I might be completely wrong about this, but this is all like how I could think about it. If you've got an HV Lipo that's saying it's 8,200 and then you're only charging it at 4.2, you're selling it short. So it then jumped up. I then cycled it once more, 4.35. IR stayed the same, and the milliamps dropped down significantly. Went from 7,900 to 7,200. Then I threw a normal cycle at it, and I now got 4.2, obviously, IR of 1.4, and a capacity of 7,238, which is the highest capacity that I've had out of all of the time. You know, we look at the Lipos on the right hand side here. The capacity from this point down the bottom right hand corner never really moved across above 7,200, other than when I was doing this one down here. But 7,238 and a 1.4 IR, I think that's half decent. Suddenly become a half decent Lipo worth using. So that was the HV cycle was quite an important process to get the Lipo sort of woken up even further. So I would thoroughly recommend thinking about the HV cycle. Now, you know, I'm not suggesting that you should be doing this trackside because you'll get chucked out, and I'm definitely not promoting that. But in your own home, to prepare your Lipos before race day, if you're a stock racer or any racer for that fact, I think it's worth doing. So I then got Lipo number 2, the old crapper, wasn't really giving me much, and I did the same deal, and it really didn't make that much difference. So unfortunately, if you don't see any change really with your Lipo through 4 or 5 cycles, maybe 6 cycles, give it a day, then go another 2 or 3 cycles, unfortunately, it isn't the best. So it unfortunately, you know, you live and die by the sword, right? So now we come on to where are we at here? Okay, sorry, I was just lots of notes here and I'm just remembering my place. Sorry about that. Great. So just want to make sure that you can see that there. Great. So now Lipo got lipo number one. Lipo number one is the old lipo, and lipo 2 and 3 are now the two new lipos that I purchased to see what the difference would be. Again, bearing in mind okay. Sorry, I'm just reading the chaps. Yeah. So the flickering is back, unfortunately. So I'm going to keep my fingers out of the equation. So but hopefully the speech is still okay, and I'll point as and when I need to. Sorry about the flickering. It does that when I stream for a decent amount of time. So now we're back to lipo. Lipo 1 is the original, and so. What I then wanted to do was I wanted to discharge all three of these lipos, and I wanted to then charge them from the outset at an HV cycle. So two brand new lipos. I'm not going to cycle them at 4.2 and down again. I'm going to go up to 4.35 and then back down. And then back down to low threes again. It's up to you to flick around with that. I'm not going to tell you where that would be, but I wouldn't go as low as 3, and I wouldn't go as high as 3.7. So find an area in there that gives you some consistency and some decent figures. So I discharged the first one. And lipo 1 returned the lowest IR that I've had at 1.1. So I've got an IR of 1.1, and the size of the storage was 7,911. I'm just making sure that epoxy camera, sorry chaps, if it's now flickering. Just see if I can, give me 1 second here. Bear with me 1 second, chaps. Sorry about this, chaps. What I might need to do is it's OBS, my studio software, that doesn't like it. Hopefully that's now, at least you can now see the figures. So working across the page, and hopefully you can see those figures okay. So across the, just underneath Lipo 1, Lipo 2, Lipo 3, those figures there are the HV figures. So Lipo 1 is a 1.1 IR, Lipo 2 is an IR of 1.0, and the IR of the third Lipo is 1.2. The milliamps of those three lipos, the 7911, Lipo 2 is 8,765, and Lipo 3 is 8,578. What I then did, I returned all of those lipos back to storage, and then you can see on the left hand side of the page that I then discharged at 3C, and I charged them back up to 4.20, which is what we can do at trackside. Now remember, Lipo number 1 is the original Lipo that was a bit of a crapper. It was okay. It was a 1 point. We had a 1.4 and a 1.4 IR and a storage of 7238. Well, after another day, so this was day 3, another day of cycling that Lipo, I've now got it down to a 1.3 IR, a 7200. Lipo 2, after one cycle, it's down to 1.1 and a storage of 8,000. And Lipo 3 is 1.2 and a storage of 7,900. So all of this stuff, in terms of the change of the capacity of the Lipo, the capacity of the Lipo has really jumped up from the old to the new. So I think if you're going to be looking for anything, I think internal resistance is something that you can really work at, and you just need to sit there, work with the Lipo going up and down with the HV and working down. Now James asked a good question about what am I doing with a discharge bank. Now you can discharge at 40 amps. I believe that there is no cap on how much you discharge, but what you need to have is a discharge bank. Unfortunately, I haven't got one of those, and I can't find one to buy, so I'm going to make one. Again, Nick Adams does a really good video on making a discharge bank, and I think how quick you take the energy out of these lipos, again, it will help your internal resistance going forwards. At the top of column Lipo 2, what you'll see there is the IR rating of 1.2 and milliamps of 8,200. That was the very first charge after the HV charge that I did the day before. I'm not going to move the board around because it's flickering enough as it is, and I want you to be able to see these numbers. IR on Lipo 2, but principally what's happening here is if you're charging your HV lipos at home, not trackside, at home, and you're charging them up to 4.35 and then taking them down to low threes somethings, you are going to get more out of your Lipo than you would be if you were just charging up to 4.2 and back down again. The capacity of the Lipo, the way I see it is, and it feels like when you charge it to 4.35 at HV, you are stretching, if you like, the Lipo. It feels like you're stretching the capacity a bit more, so that when you then charge to 4.2, it feels like you're going to get you're getting a slightly bigger bang for your buck, and the IR rating jumps up. So the upshot of this video, in my mind, is you're gonna soon see very, very quickly, within probably 3 or 4 charges, whether your lipo is responding to what you're doing to it. So 1, see it up and down, 2, see it up and down, 3, see it up and down at 4.2. When she's warmed up, then go HV. That's what I would do. Go HV, go a bit deeper, go up and down a good few times, and see what you can get out of your charger. Ultimately, you're looking to increase your milliamps, size of the capacity, and you're looking to reduce the internal resistance. You can go deeper than that. You can get, a resistance meter, certainly something that would help you improve your testing. But what it's not going to do is suddenly give you the opportunity to do something different. It's like when you're buying motors. If you've got all this motor checking equipment, you can only improve your motor if you've got 5 stators, 5 sensor boards, and 5 rotors in front of you. So as long as you've got one consistent measuring tool, it gives you a great opportunity to analyze your lipos. So don't give your lipos a couple of charges and go bugger it, they're shit, and go and buy new ones. Give yourself a bit of time. Do it over 3 days. Cycle them. Love them like your children. Just give them a little bit of time to warm themselves up, get them HV charged, and then we can go back to really giving yourself a better understanding of whether your lipo is good or bad. Now, what I do want to show you is some of the settings on the iCharger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end this stream, and then I'm going to come back on, and I'm going to do a stream on the iCharger and the various settings that I use and adjust to adjust this charging and discharging and such like. Hopefully this has been useful. Really apologise for the stream quality. It's a bit jumping around, but I wanted to get the questions up on the side of the page there, so I used OBS, which seems to be it's not liking certain things going on in my stream. So I'll be back literally in moments. All the best.